Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, and this week I have such a fun video planned because I wanted to talk about albums that are my favorite debut albums of all time, but also debut albums that completely changed the landscape of the music industry. And there are only a handful of artists that can come into this space and really take over in a way that nobody has before. So I really wanted to explore that in this video, and what better way to start than talking about the queen of pop herself, Britney Spears, because her debut album really changed pop music forever. Baby One More Time was released January 12th, 1999, and truly the world was never the same. It is the best-selling debut album from a teenager in history, and it is going to go down as one of the greatest albums of all time because what it really did for her. The lead single being Baby One More Time, which of course, we all know that song. Like, that is a song that if you asked anyone on the street, they could sing you a little bit like, give me a sign, hit me baby one more time. Like, anyone would be able to tell you that. And that is just a small impact of this project. It revitalized teen pop. It really set the stage for what was to come in the early 2000s with all of these teenagers coming up either as solo artists or as groups and kind of forging ahead in the pop space because it was kind of lost at the tail end of the 90s. There was a focus on this project of creating melodic, catchy pop songs, and everyone say thank you so much, Max Martin, because he produced a majority of that project, and he is one of the best, if not the best pop music producer of all time, but other people started to follow suit, like Justin and NSYNC, like Christina Aguilera. There were so many acts that really took inspiration from this. Baby One More Time topped the Billboard Hot 100. I mean, the fact that she made this record when she was 17 years old literally gags me to this day. Like, she just burst onto the scene, and Britney had everything. She had these catchy songs that people did not want to stop singing. She had a presence of like this sweet Southern girl off the stage, and then when she got on the stage, she was a true beast. She was giving choreo that no one else was doing at the time, maybe besides like Michael Jackson. But like, the second that she got on that stage, she became a different person. And then when she got off, she was giving us like charming moments in interviews that really made the whole world fall in love with her.
Well, honestly, I want people to see me as an inspiration, not a role model. Because when I'm on stage, that's my time to shine and do my thing, and for kids to look at that and go, wow, and it's exhilarating, it's a cool feeling, and it's inspiring,
The music combined with that image really sparked a new standard for the way pop stars were going to be marketed to the general public for years to come, and even still now. There's a formula that really started with Britney, and it showed labels and people in the industry what you could do when you kind of gave the world this package. I love this album so much. Baby One More Time was like the intro to me to Britney Spears. And I really never looked back. Like, I love her discography, and I would definitely be interested in doing a deep dive at some point on everything because I love Britney Spears. I wish nothing but the best for her. But this project was more than just an album that was released. It was her foray into superstardom, truly, and it made me a forever fan. But more than that, it opened the door for so many of our favorite artists today because Britney changed the pop landscape and made people start to care about this genre of music way more. It allowed labels to realize that it can be truly lucrative and successful when they pour money into pop artists. So without Britney really starting this trend at the turn of the millennium, like, there would be no standard for pop stardom. Like, in my opinion, she was everything. And I just think that sometimes she doesn't get her flowers because people forget how iconic she once was. Like, with everything that's gone on separately from her music career, people forget how inspiring and just downright amazing Britney Spears was. And this album really just took the world by storm, and everyone was hooked moving forward. Like, they loved her. I felt like I had to start with that one because it allowed a lot of these artists, who I'm going to talk about later, have the careers that they are currently having. Without Britney, there isn't a modern day pop star, I think. The next person I want to talk about, because I'm gonna go chronologically in this video, is Taylor Swift's debut album, because How could I not? I am a huge Taylor Swift fan, but even if I wasn't, I would say this album changed music forever because it introduced us to Miss Taylor Allison Swift. And without Taylor being in the music industry, it would be a lot different because there have been so many things that Taylor has done that other artists have taken inspiration from, and also from the legal side of it with owning her masters now. Like, she's really started to pave the way for that and helped artists realize how important it is to have ownership of your work. So let's start with Debut. This album may not be one of Taylor's most critically acclaimed albums. It never topped the charts. However, it did set the stage for a teenager who writes all of her own songs, performs with her guitar, to just light up so many of our lives. The singles from this album were Tim McGraw, Teardrops on My Guitar, Picture to Burn, and then Our Song and Should Have Said No, which both went number 1 on the Hot Country Songs chart. It's also important to note that even though this album did peak at number 5 on the Billboard Top 200, it was the longest running album that stayed on the charts throughout 2000 to 2009, racking up 227 weeks, and then it has been in and out of the charts ever since then. Like, it'll still pop back in and out. The longevity of Taylor is another thing that truly needs to be studied. But my first experience with this album was actually in elementary school. I remember driving on the bus to school and my bus driver gave us his phone. I don't know why. It was like a flip Motorola Razr. And he had one song downloaded and it was Our Song. So my friend, we would literally blast it to the bus every single morning going into school. And that to me was when I knew that I was going to be a Taylor Swift stan. That song was so catchy. I just loved everything about it. And I feel like that is not a unique experience. There are so many of us that had similar experiences discovering Taylor at a formative time in our childhood, and then we just kind of rode for her ever since. That was the beauty of what Taylor was and still is able to do with her fans. Taylor was doing something really unique, which was utilizing MySpace to connect with people there and share her music, but also some behind the scenes. She would drop some Easter eggs. And at the time, most country artists and just artists in general weren't directly communicating with their fans in this way. Social media was relatively new and MySpace was one of the first social media platforms. Taylor took advantage of it wholeheartedly because she was even letting her music be put on there in the little widget that you could, assign a song to your profile. So people would discover her songs through friends' profiles. And it's just so genius because it was such an untapped market at that point, utilizing social media, especially to engage the younger fan base. She also got to share a lot more of her personality that way. I mean, of course she was doing interviews and stuff, but she was commenting back to fans, sharing how she was feeling and taking us on this ride with her, which again, one of her greatest strengths. She's able to make our stadium feel like you were having a concert at her house. For some reason, she just gets it. She can connect with every single person in a place, whether it's virtual or in real life. And even after MySpace, after the platform went away, she moved to Tumblr, where she would again show her Easter eggs and create these bonds from the start of her career that are lasting her to now. This idea of connecting with your fans on such a personal level is something that changed the music industry. And it all started with Debut and Taylor Swift because she was one of the first people to realize that if you can kind of get in on the ground floor with these people, they're gonna wanna lift you up. And that is exactly what they did, because after Debut, she just became a force to be reckoned with in the music industry. The second Fearless came out and all of the singles that preceded that album, crazy sales. She did everything right during that era to lay the groundwork for a extremely successful career. And now look at her. She is the biggest pop star on the planet and no one is touching her. And it all started with Debut. This album changed my life and I'm sure it changed so many of yours. As I said, there are moments in my life that I will remember forever, and hearing Our Song on the bus for the first time is one of those moments. And I don't have that with many other artists. For some reason, Taylor stuck with all of us, and that is why this album changed my life, but it also changed the music industry, I would say, for the better, because 1, we got Taylor Swift. 2, we found out that it can really help when artists start to engage with their fan base on a more personal level. And 3, she is now helping smaller artists raise their platform by allowing them to open for her and, advocating for artists to own their own work. So that is my story with Debut, and another thing that I need to leave you with is the fact that it was a pop country album. While Taylor Swift started her career as a country artist, she always had that pop infusion and inevitably was going to lean pop at some point in her career. But this kind of mixing of genre was really interesting, especially in the country space, because up until that point, it had never really been done that successfully. So labels did definitely take note of that. Next, we have The Fame by Lady Gaga. I love this album. I love this era. It is my favorite thing to talk about because besides the music being so stunning, like that album front to back, I listen to every single day now. But the fact that she was just doing anything and everything during that era just makes it so much better. Like, this is my favorite debut album era as a whole. Music, the appearances, the performances, everything, this is my favorite ever. Gaga not only became a music icon during this time, but she became a pop culture icon. There was not a day where you could not look on the news, in the tabloids, just anywhere, and not see a story about her. And that is something that really does not happen anymore. Of course, the oversaturation of media, whatever, that can be a totally different debate, but like the fact that she was everywhere at this time is so wild. It was like a performance art piece for her, and she was living in her camp fantasy for years, because I'm talking about like the Fame, Into the Fame Monster, like 3 years of work before Born This Way that I'm kind of lumping into this debut album era. And I knew my girl Stephanie was mad when she saw the Stephanie Germanotta You Will Never Be Famous Facebook group. I talk about this all the time, but Lady Gaga's classmates in college made a Facebook group titled Stephanie Germanotta You Will Never Be Famous, and I knew that lit a fire inside of her that was never going to diminish until she achieved everything that she has achieved now and more. Like, she got to work. This album itself was an extreme commercial success. It sold over 18 million copies. 2 singles, Just Dance and Poker Face, both went #1 on the Billboard Hot 100. It was nominated for 6 Grammys, and she won 2 with Best Electronic Dance Album and then Best Dance Pop Recording for Poker Face. Now, besides the singles, we all know Just Dance, we all know Poker Face. Like, I need you guys to stream Summer Boy. Where is the Summer Boy love? Like, the fact that Gaga performed this song like literally one time live at Lollapalooza and the video footage just got released to the internet a couple months back is crazy. But Brown Eyes, nothing else I can say. Boys, 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 like I could go on. Disco Heaven, put some respect on her name. Like, these songs are so good and they hold up today. No one else was doing what Gaga was doing in 2008. Like, the reason recession pop has a name is large in part due to Lady Gaga. The biggest thing that this album did for the music industry was really increase the commercialization of like dance pop music. It influenced so many artists to lean into that sound again, and she was just giving us fun songs to dance to. Lady Gaga was an escape for so many people from reality, and that is what she was able to do. That was her power, and that is how she changed the industry. She was doing anything and everything to be seen and captured during this time. Like, she literally performed in an IKEA parking lot. She had 2 backup dancers that would follow her everywhere and just sit next to her while she was doing interviews. It was so similar to Gwen Stefani's Love, Angel Music, Baby era, where she had those 4 backup dancers, follow her everywhere. Similar with Gaga. She was wearing the most outrageous outfits. I mean, lest we not forget the meat dress in 2010, but like besides that, the bubble dress, the fire bra, it was everything. Her life was an art piece, and she was putting herself on display for the general public whenever she stepped out of the house. No one is doing it like that right now. She had theatrics in everything she did. The way that she walked, the way that she talked, the way that she performed. Like, I don't have any word besides camp to describe it, because she was just giving it. She was feeding us so much. One standout moment that changed my life was the 2009 VMA performance of Paparazzi. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you must be living under a rock, because this is the most talked about award show performance I think ever, because of just how it captivated everyone. The blood dripping down, people legitimately thinking that she was bleeding through her outfit. Like, 10 out of 10. She also did use social media to connect with her fan base. She was very, very active on Twitter in her early days, and she cultivated a community of her little monsters. And I mean, my paws are up. My paws have been up since 2008. Like, I was 8 years old back then. I don't care. Like, my paws were up. Another thing that drew a lot of people towards her was that she was an advocate for the LGBTQ plus community. She spoke out in times when it wasn't necessarily safe to do so. Also, there was a hermaphrodite rumor that she never confirmed or denied. She was like, so what if I am? What about it? And that made so many people gain so much respect for her because she could so easily just be like, no, like I'm a woman, but she stood up for the trans community in that time and really just embraced gay culture and became this icon. She also prolonged this era for as long as she could. After the Fame came out, a year later, she released the Fame Monster, which was an EP, but she also tacked it onto the original album. The way that it's on streaming services right now, it's like side 1 and side 2. Bad Romance was the first single from the Fame Monster, and I mean, that song peaked at number 2. It should have got number 1, but all of these songs are absolute bangers. Like, they are so good and they hold up even today. Then the second single, Telephone featuring Beyonce. The absolute madness this caused when this music video was premiering on MTV was unparalleled. The fact that Gaga and Beyonce were coming together to release this smash and then doing a big premiere on MTV in a primetime spot. People were crowded around their TVs to watch this, and the fact that that song only peaked at number 3 is crazy. It did so much for the culture. Like, the cigarette glasses that Gaga has on, like, in that video live rent-free in my head. Like, they're so cool, and people, again, recreate it on TikTok every Halloween now. The third single was Alejandro, which I love that song. However, that was actually not going to be the third single. It was going to be Dance in the Dark, and then her team and her decided to switch it out last minute. I personally think that was the right move. I love Dance in the Dark, but I think Alejandro was a bigger moment. I also just used to sing that song all the time in 2009. Like, my cousin had a graduation party and I literally sung it on karaoke as a 9-year-old. But the fact that this era started with Gaga performing in a parking lot and ended with her getting 2 Grammy wins, performing on the world's biggest stages. I think she headlined Lollapalooza in like 2009 or 2010. So like, her first performance at Lolla was in 2008, and then a year or 2 later, literally headlining. Her rise was so massive because she made herself so available to the public and people fell in love with her. And even if people didn't like her, they were talking about her, and that is really important. All PR is good PR, and she had a lot of people against her because at first people were doubting her talent. They were saying the rudest things about her and the things that she did, but it didn't even matter. She was being talked about every single day, and that is what is important. And then she had stans who were just loving her art, her artistry, her singing, the way that she stood up for the community, everything. And I mean, Gaga is a legend. Like, she will go down in history books as one of the greatest to ever do it. And the fact that I have been on this ride for so long and Mayhem comes out this week, I can't. Like, I just love her so much. Next up, we have another insanely formative album that changed a lot of people's lives, especially if you were on Tumblr during this time, and that is Born to Die by Lana Del Rey. This album not only changed so many of us, but it also had a very lasting impact on the music industry that I'm gonna get into. When you press play and you hear that Born to Die strings intro, I Ascend. And I know you guys do that too, but like, I think it is important to point out that this is technically not Lana Del Rey's first album. Technically, her first project was titled Lana Del Rey, aka Lizzie Grant, and it came out in 2010. However, it was removed from the iTunes store 3 months later, and it was like completely scrubbed from the internet, so you can't really go and stream it right now on any streaming service, which is why I'm counting Born to Die as her official debut album. I was 11 years old when Video Games dropped, and oh my god, Video Games is a song that means the world to me. Like, I don't feel the same way that I feel when I listen to any other song than I do when I listen to Video Games by Lana Del Rey. Oh my god. It changed my life. It's one of my top 5 songs of all time, but like, I know that I'm not the only one because that song ruled Tumblr. It took the platform by storm. It gave so many people a reason to stan this new alternative artist with this Americana vintage vibe. Like, she had the aesthetics down pat, and at a time where aesthetics were so important, especially on the internet, it was like a match made in heaven, truly. It's so painfully 2012 that if Lana debuted any other time, I don't think it would have been the same. The album itself dropped in 2012, and in total, it has spent more than 500 weeks on the Billboard Top 200. It did peak at number 2, but during this time, Lana's popularity just skyrocketed even before the breakout single Summertime Sadness. I will say, the one thing that it really did in the music industry was introduce this like indie pop sound that a lot of people see now in a Lorde, a Billie Eilish. Like, Lana really paved the way for that specific sound that kind of mixed dark, indie, pop, kind of all of it together. And Lorde and Billie do it in a little bit of a different way, but I believe, and they have both said, that Lana is an inspiration for them. The project itself did pull from other genres as well. There was some hip hop, there were a lot of strings, there were some jazz influences, and it created a super unique sound that again showed labels that you can bend genre in a way that we see very frequently now. Other artists were doing it back then, but few and far between. There's also that combination of the grand orchestral moments and Lana's like sultry vocals, where sometimes she'll go in her higher register, sometimes she'll go lower, and it's really rich is like the way I could describe it. The lyrics are so different. She's telling a story and she's selling us this fantasy of a 50s, 60s era where we're riding into the sunset. And I don't know, like the imagery that she's able to create is so hard to do as a songwriter and as a musician that it just felt so effortless in Born to Die. And again, the aesthetics and the way that she was creating her music videos, leaning into that wholeheartedly, it was a dream for Tumblr users to literally have Lana Del Rey. Like, it was a gift for them. The standout single was Summertime Sadness. That was one that became the most mainstream. It peaked at number 6 on the Billboard Hot 100, and she was doing appearances. She was a little bit on the shyer side, which I think was maybe a little bit refreshing for people to see, especially because she was so big in the online community. People who maybe felt ostracized or alone in their own lives were able to find community on the internet at this point, and Tumblr was a big reason for that. So Lana, again, having a softer personality, I think really resonated with a lot of her fans. She also had a very cinematic way of approaching her art and, you know, releasing visuals and getting people really on board with the fantasy that she was offering us. She made 50s and 60s references seem young and hip and cool and something that we should all be doing too. And that, I think, is the magic that she was able to really give us as an artist. It was just so unique. It captured the hearts of so many of us, and that is why she has so many fans. Like, if you go back into those early years, she, again, was able to create this cult fan base that has just grown and grown and grown to the point where, I mean, in 2024, she headlined Coachella to 100,000 people. Like, she's a worldwide sensation, and it all started with Born to Die and the way that she was able to resonate with her fans and her audience at that time. Lastly, in this video, I need to talk about Channel Orange by Frank Ocean. Frank is one of my favorite musicians of all time. I think that he has such a unique perspective on the things that he does, the way that he conveys his thoughts and his feelings, and I would be remiss to not talk about Channel Orange in this video as an album that changed not only my life, but the music industry in general for a lot of unique reasons. Thinking About You changed my life. When I first heard Thinking About You, I knew that this was an artist that I was going to stan.
A tornado flew around my room.
I loved that song. I had no reason to be feeling that way. Like, I had no reason to be pining over someone. I think the first time I heard it was like maybe in my early teens, but there was just something about the melody. I mean, I've always gravitated towards a little bit of sadder music, and I think that song just really spoke to me. And it is still regarded as one of the most unique bodies of work ever created. There are so many critic reviews that refer to it as groundbreaking, honestly. There's so many different sounds on this record. There are so many different influences that inspired Frank's production and songwriting and storytelling. However, the album sounds really cohesive even when there are so many different pieces of production used throughout. And I think that is the telltale sign of a great artist, when they can experiment with the way their music is sounding and put different types of songs on a record and have it still feel extremely cohesive. That's when you know that someone is extremely talented and doing their job right. It debuted at number 2 on the Billboard 200, again, with critics just saying that it blew them away. It got a 9.5 on Pitchfork and was also nominated for Album of the Year at the 2012 Grammys. The lyricism in this album is absurd in the best way possible, because the way that Frank Ocean is able to write songs, I believe no one else can do. There are analogies and references and things that are drawn from all over. And the way he is able to convey certain feelings and ideas, especially about love and lust and everything in between, are things that like I couldn't even like express, even if I had a million dictionaries in front of me. Like I could not come up with those combination of words that he is able to create. And that is why people just loved him. Like this music was just stuff that people had never heard. And he was able to, again, create this insane group of fans who just loved his art. One thing that I really need to talk about is a week before the album was released, Frank posted a thank you letter on Tumblr. And in it, he revealed his sexuality in the context of him talking about his first love. The reason he did this was he wanted to reclaim his own narrative, because during listening parties of the album ahead of its release, there were a lot of journalists who were taking note of the lyrics, and he alludes to being gay in some of the songs, and some he just straight up says it kind of. But as the album release date was approaching, there were think pieces and articles that had started to come out about his sexuality, and instead of letting that dictate what the narrative was, he decided to reclaim it himself and just come out on Tumblr, again, where he felt closest to his fans. At that time, a lot of artists were using Tumblr to create connections with their communities, and I think that was great. It was a real staple of that time, and by posting that letter, it allowed him to gain the power back before his debut album went into the world. And I think that that was amazing, because it was really empowering for the queer community. At that point, it wasn't chic to be in the community. It wasn't looked at as something that should be celebrated necessarily. But when Frank put that statement out and then released the album, it kind of felt like a celebration of his queerness. And a lot of people really resonated with that in a time when, you know, back then gay marriage was not legalized. Like it was way more taboo than it is today. So the fact that a huge artist like that was able to take over the narrative and spin it to become this positive celebration of himself and his love and his life, it was amazing. And that is a lasting impact that it has had in the music industry, because it allowed people to start being unapologetically themselves. I think especially in the R&B space, it was hard to identify as anything but straight. And from then on, people really felt comfortable being themselves, and also record labels saw how much people were championing Frank during this time that it made them, I think, less fearful to sign talent that maybe would be deemed a little bit more taboo back in the day because they were queer. So I think that it was a big, big step in the right direction for the music industry, and the way that Frank was able to celebrate himself, but also just the community and love in general, no matter who it's between, I think is the most lasting impact. And it helped make people feel less alone in the world. It was a record that people listened to in order to feel comfortable with themselves. And that is just what you hope for as an artist, is to provide art that people can go to as a way to escape. And Frank did it in such a seamless, effortless way, because he is so good at what he does. The music on this album is great. It is a 10 out of 10, but the cultural significance of this album, I think, is what made it this big, big phenomenon. And I love everything about it. Those were 5 of the albums that I believe changed my life and the music industry. I could do like 3 versions of this video with even more albums that I loved, but I wanted to start with ones that I felt really changed the landscape of music and culture in the music industry. And you can't have those conversations specifically without Britney Spears, without a Taylor Swift, without Gaga, even without Frank and Lana, because again, all of these artists changed the industry for the better because of what they did. And I want your thoughts. I need to know, guys, like, what albums changed your life, but also what albums do you think changed the music industry? Because I have some other ones. I'm not gonna reveal them right now because I might do a part 2 to this video, but what are your thoughts on albums and art? And do you agree with me? Do you think these 5 albums changed the music industry? I love this. I love being able to talk for a while and just connect with you guys in like a longer form way. So if you have any video ideas, also comment those down below, and have a great week.